Where? Oh, there I am. I couldn't see myself on the screen. Sorry for the really awkward pause. I was expecting to be in the top left corner. But hello, everyone. Good afternoon, evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Today, we are having an extra special live stream. It is the PvP Round Table. We're going to have a chat with some content creators. We've also got Mod Rock and Mod Goblin joining us. SkillSpecs in the corner with no cam, being all sad. I believe a cooking stream may have been the culprit to removing that one. But that is what it is. I've got a couple of announcements I want to get through. Ben. It's all right. It's all right, mate. I'll get through a couple of announcements and then we'll do introductions just so that we can get the announcements out of the way and get straight into the PvP stuff. First of all, exclamation mark game status. If you're not aware, we are looking to do a reboot of the game, which is to fix the issues affecting logging on mobile and Steam. We do have more information that will be shared soon, but check out the game status page with exclamation mark game status for more information. There will be a 45-minute countdown timer in-game. The dogs aren't happy about that reboot, apparently. Next up, we have exclamation mark game update. This is from last week, introducing the activity advisor. We've made this new feature available for a select number of accounts and hoping to be rolling it out to everyone once it fully launches in the very near future. And that is all we have for announcements, nice and short. I'm sure there'll be more on Thursday. I don't have to deal with those, though, thankfully. Let's talk PvP. All right, we've got a couple of topics we'll get into and then just some general discussions. But I think first and foremost, it's worthwhile maybe just talking about experience in PvP. Let us know what kind of PvP you engage with and what kind of player you are inside PvP and maybe outside of that as well. And if I can perhaps start with you, Dino, I hope you're doing well. Tell us a little bit about your PvP experience.
I'm doing good. I'm scared. No, basically, I won't go into too much detail because I think I've been through it a little bit before. But PK since 2005. Massive noob for a few years, free to play, Fire Strike, Rock Multi, that sort of thing. Sort of only took it, like I guess, seriously since Old School came out. I sort of joined singles teams, multi teams, and yeah, just done a bit of everything really. And then started streaming in 2017, and that's when it sort of, I don't know, sort of done a rev caves and stuff, a bit of everything.
You muted, fella.
I'm really scared. Yeah, I can't.
Oh! All I'm going to say is I've not been on a stream for a long time. I'm clearly very rusty. Apologies about that. I just said, yeah, the 2017, that's when you started streaming and we became both friends and enemies at the same time.
Mainly enemies, but yeah.
I'll take it. It's fair. All right. And how about yourself, Rhys? Tell us about your experience in PvP.
Started in 2013, started single PK and multi PK. I've done so much in PvP, but in general, Deadman as well with Blazers, where we won quite a lot of money to be fair in competitive tournaments. But in the end, I started doing streaming for like the past year or so. It's going really well. Pretty fun, that's about it, pretty much.
Awesome. I noticed you've been popping off in the PvP arena of late. The first week of release,
it's so
especially.
Fun, the PvP arena.
Yeah.
So fun.
Have you tried out the other modes yet since they've been implemented? I think it's been Pure Week, right?
Yeah, Pure Week's a lot better than the main week actually. The activity's gone down a little bit, but it is very fun. It's quite hard to climb now with the elo changes, which is like a good thing, I guess. Elo.
Well, I'm sure we can talk about the PvP arena in general. Actually, it just so happens to be one of the first topics we've got on the list, so we'll save it for then. All right, nice one. Brilliant. Thank you, Rhys. And how about yourself, SkillSpecs? Tell us about your experience in PvP. I'm sure many people know about your many adventures through Deadman, but what else do you do outside of that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Ayiza. I've been around for a hot minute. I do everything. I'm not necessarily good at everything on the in terms of every type of PKing, but I try every style of PKing. At the minute, enjoying the old deep wilderness outside the Revenant caves. I mean, this is what we have at the minute, and dying every single day, pretty much, boys. That's an ongoing process. I mean, but I try, all right? I try, and with each death, I get better, is what I tell myself, kinda.
I like it.
Let's go with it.
All right, yeah.
If nothing else, SkillSpecs, at least you're keeping the food chain running and supplying.
That is true.
How high up the food chain are you, Jay? Right at the very top.
I use this reference, man. Like I'm a gazelle drinking from the watering hole, man, and there's a bunch of lions they just watch me drink, mate, and then pounce when they feel free. That's how it goes, man. Every day.
Brilliant. Thanks, SkillSpecs. All right, how about we talk about JMods and their experience in PvP? Whew, it's where things get spicy, right? I'm preparing for it. I'm gonna go absolutely last. I'm gonna gauge chat's reaction and figure out what I need to say to keep them happy. How about yourself, Rock? Let's start with you. What's your experience like in PvP?
So I got into the multi-clanning scene between 2004 and 2006 in the old Return Wars. I was a member of the clan called The. So we used to regularly run up against teams like DI, Rot, etc. in the past. After that point, I didn't really pick it back up again until 2010. I was one of the few people that decided to make summoning tanks to hit the arena and hit low-level wilderness to basically just let all the summoning do the work for us in the laziest way possible. Since then, haven't really dabbled much, more been side of it from the development side of it, where as the lead designer for the rework of Last Man Standing and some features that have changed since then. Been involved in a dozen Deadman behind the scenes as well, including developing a chunk of one of them. And yeah, just trying to keep my hands involved in the PvP content that we've been trying to push for and work on since then.
Awesome, thank you, Rock. And Mod Goblin, how about yourself? I heard you did pretty well in the PvP focus stream the other week, so I'm keen to hear about your experience.
You know me, I've won every Deadman, never died. No, I didn't do like a whole lot back in the day beyond the original. Like, you know, you'd get your full rune set, you'd send it north of Edgeville, you'd die, you'd make your 200k at Green Dragons, you'd rinse and repeat. After Old School came out, I did like a fair bit of Bounty Hunter in its initial launch before it got changed. I made like a 50 attack pure, then took that to 60. Then when we got Bounty Hunter V2, I made another 50 attack pure. I don't know, I just love the Gmod so much, and 60 attack felt like I preferred 50 to 60. They're really quick to put together as well. Like a kind of like 50 attack, 77 strength kind of piece. Yeah. That's most of like my experience is like edge style. I'll like hop around South Caves a little bit, where I think the standard of player is a bit worse on like a med level and a pure at the moment. Yeah. Every now and then like Wildy Slayer Caves, because there aren't many clans there anyway, even though it's multi, it's kind of like free kills every now and then. And I like hopping around at like Venenatis especially, but these days I think most of the people that you hop to are kind of wearing like Carols, have the Dins, and have the Mandem on speed dial, so they just book it into multi as soon as you teleblock or anything like that. But yeah, that's and since starting at Jagex, you know, I think my second week here was Game Jam. We did the Wildy expansion project with Sofan, Mod Ayiza. I feel like there might have been somebody else involved, I'm not sure. If I'm forgetting anyone, then sorry, not personal. And yeah, since then, a little bit of involvement with the PvP arena. Trying to be pretty involved with the PvP feedback disc. And that's most of my experience, I say, at the moment.
Awesome, thank you, Goblin. Sounds pretty extensive, to be honest, if you ask me. Way more extensive than mine, anyway. For myself, my like PvP experience in-game mostly originated from before Old School, shock horror. I used to be notorious in Edgeville, as in I notoriously spent time there. I wasn't known. Big Ayiza rolling up to over the ditch. No, but I used to primarily play a range tank because it was really easy to play. Vengeance was really strong with the chaotic crossbow. I used to find that really fun. I had multiple different pure accounts. I used to love the scene at Varrock Multi. It was Varrock East. I'd go to, and then I'd join a random team and then get absolutely demolished when they'd all backstab me, but those were fantastic times. So yeah, mostly focused around range pures. I then moved a little bit into free-to-play PKing. I've got a free-to-play pure in Old School currently. I haven't played it a huge amount, and I've dabbled every now and then when we've had the beta worlds open, especially when the Clan Wars portals have been around, getting into a few fights. My claim to fame, I think, is I beat Ruben in a 1v1. He's really sad about that. If anyone knows Sasuke's 123, he's going to hate the fact I called him out live on the official Old School channel. I did beat him. He said I never would. Outside of that, I've commentated every Deadman apart from the first two, I believe. The second one I was involved in. Wow! I've been involved in the PvP. Yeah, okay, that's because I
tied him up. The word Deadman
you said the word, bro. You said the word, man. You said the word.
Jesus.
I love that. Yeah. I helped out with the original PvP Arena Championship that first came about. That was just before I joined Jagex. Commentated the All Stars event. And yeah, mostly like nowadays, a lot of my experience is leaning on other players and kind of getting their information and feedback, because I obviously don't have that same in-game experience and knowledge as what other players do. So it's a really useful thing for me to be able to do, and I just kind of try and push and pioneer for PvP changes, given the fact that it's quite underrepresented in terms of content and updates. Not to say that that's the only thing that I work on. It's just I feel like a lot of players will pinpoint me as the PvP Jmod because I'm quite outspoken in regards to it. But yeah, it's mostly just about the fact I really want to just support the smaller communities that don't really have as much. And then the other areas that are, everyone's a little bit more confident in working on can be handled as well. So, yeah, that's it for me then. All right. So that's about our experience. What about some topics? So the first one that we've got in here is to talk about the PvP arena. I guess the first point really is, why did we actually create the PvP arena in the first place? I can kick things off here, and if Goblin and Rock want to expand on it. Ultimately, it was to replace the duel arena with content that was more engaging. As simple as that, in all honesty. But I think by bringing in the PvP arena, in particular, it allowed us to introduce a way to help players match up against others that are maybe more balanced in terms of skill. Obviously, we're still really early into PvP arena's launch, so the matchmaking system still needs some time to kind of embed itself, and we need to make tweaks and changes. But ultimately, the goal was replace the duel arena with something that's way more engaging, isn't just a case of boxing or whip staking, and then allow players to have an opportunity to fight up against other players of a similar skill level, so that in the long term, they may then use that newfound confidence with their abilities to venture out into the wilderness and maybe go and find the Gazette drinking from the pond in the middle of the Rev Caves, as SkillSpecs quite kindly described himself. Rock or Goblin, you want to add anything else to that?
Summed it up perfectly, mate.
Yeah, I don't have anything to. When I got here, it was already rewards V2 time. So.
Fair. We're talking about rewards actually. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the rewards that we polled, the voting process, potentially why those rewards failed. Maybe if I can kick off someone else's viewpoint to begin with. Goblin, if maybe you want to, I know I'm throwing you in the deep end here, but I know that you spent a lot of time working with the community, especially in the PvP feedback Discord. You obviously came into this project when it was already, designed. We already had a set of rewards in mind that we looked to pitch, and you worked really hard on reworking those in the V2 iteration as well. So maybe just kind of like from your viewpoint in terms of the rewards, maybe why you felt that they failed, and just your general thoughts on the voting process as a whole.
I think it's a tricky one to talk about. I think the easy response would be that in terms of, well, I don't know if there is an easy response. So the tricky thing with them was that I think the first round was maybe not that popular because for a lot of people they felt as though it upset the balance, and that we maybe didn't shine enough of a spotlight on the fact that we'd nerfed the first iteration since they were first kind of showed to people and then polled. There was a nerf that I don't think a lot of people realized. Obviously there were some bits with the first iteration about quest skipping that people weren't really a fan of. So with the second, when I think I was talking with the PvP feedback Discord a lot, I think I tried to approach it from a position of being really conservative. But I think one of the things that happens with the polling system is that if there's this sentiment that this could be better, it's probably also worth voting no, so that you can try and then work on something better. But obviously, it's just not really worked out that way. That I think basically they weren't good enough to feel like they were great for the cohort who was selected to be able to vote on them. Maybe because they're in the PvP arena right now, and they're not weak by any means. I think in Pure and Zerk, they're actually
pretty
quite a lot of
balanced,
fun.
to be honest, yeah.
I think they're pretty well balanced.
Just not for
as
the
well.
mains, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, not for the mains.
For the mains,
really.
for the mains, they get smoked a bit. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's tricky to say. And then obviously, I think with the case of like the ornament kits and stuff, that maybe it was kind of a byproduct of the initial restricted poll, is why they got pretty heavy no votes. I'm not sure. I think later on we're probably going to talk a little bit about the kind of divide between PvP and the wider community, which might touch on some of those points in a little more detail.
Thanks, Goblin. Dino, Rhys, SkillSpecs, any kind of like thoughts on maybe if you want to focus? I know you don't have the insight that we do in terms of the voting process, but maybe your thoughts on the actual rewards themselves and why you felt that they failed. And maybe we'll start with you first, Dino.
Yeah, what I would say, PvP Arena as a whole, I think it's really good. I really like the tournament system. It's a lot better than I thought it would be. It's really, really good. But yeah, it's just kind of been let down by the rewards. And I think that's why it's probably not as popular as it should be.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
As far as I'm failing, I would agree with what Goblin said. I think when those originally polled, they were really not overpowered, but they were displayed in a way it was overpowered. Everyone was talking about the new max hit being like a 90 with the AGS, stuff like that. And then when they were revised,
90.
Yeah, legit.
When they were revised, I feel like no one really. It didn't seem to be as known. Like I'd ask my stream sometimes, and no one ever knew it was got changed. So I think people just still voted no to them.
It felt like the first iteration was definitely overpowered, I think, but the second iteration was definitely balanced, to be honest, for like what you guys wanted as well as what the community wanted. But for some reason, it still failed the poll, didn't it? So I'm not sure why that is, but you know, probably
it really is quite saddening to see, bro. After all the time goes into setting it, bro, crushes my little soul.
The kits as well. I'm very surprised the kits failed. Like, not sure why that is.
I think for the kits in particular, they failed just because a lot of people didn't want them to come from the PvP arena. It's not that they didn't like the actual kits themselves; they just didn't want to participate in a piece of content to get the rewards. Yeah, and as well, like I get that because a lot of them, or a few of those rewards, they're not items that you would typically use in PvP anyway. Some of them were, and they were intended to be tailored more towards it, but we offered like a large selection. In the hopes that it would kind of like appease both sides, really, that PvPers would get something they would want and non-PvPers would also get things that they would want, whilst also helping support the PvP arena as a whole, because obviously more activity is good.
Yeah, bring them to it
that
as well.
Was in a sense, it was more of like a passive benefit rather than a main focus, though, I would say, in terms of our design goals of the ornament kits. I feel like the polling system, generally speaking, it has like a fair amount of flaws. And one of them is that first impressions mean a huge amount. It's damned hard enough to get people to read a full dev blog in the first place and actually vote in a poll, yet alone expect them then to, read through multiple iterations, figure out what's changed, stay up to date with it all. Once that ball starts rolling, it's very difficult to stop. It's almost like an avalanche of sorts, right? It builds up momentum and the memes start getting generated, and that's what everyone latches onto because it's way more memorable than... rather than more memorable than us spurting out a load of words on saying like, actually this feels quite balanced, and we've worked with PvPers that understand the items and and get them. So I think that's mostly as towards like why they failed. I'd like to touch on the voting process a little bit, and I don't want to take the hot seat for the entire stream, but I think it's worthwhile kind of talking about the whole restricted voting side of things as well, and maybe getting your thoughts on that as a whole. For me,
was this the vote from was this the poll where you had to have played at least a game of LMS to vote for the rewards? That was that poll.
Yeah, that's
it. What was the parameters actually for that?
Okay,
do you remember? Or to actually
off the top of my head, I believe that initially it was that you had to get at least. I think we agreed on 20 kills within the wilderness or PvP worlds. Or a win in LMS. And then unfortunately it turned out that the first round of restricted voting that we did was based off just one participation in LMS. So you didn't need to have won it. You just needed to have participated. So when we did the second round, we fixed that issue and made it so that you had to have at least won a game in LMS and got those kills. And like there was quite a lot of backlash for that, and I wouldn't say that it surprised me because we kind of knew that we would get some backlash going into it. But considering how other polls had fared, I guess it's just really different because a lot of the, well, all of the rewards outside of the cosmetics would impact other players within the wilderness to some degree. It would make them either easier to kill or
Yeah, it's tailored towards them. Yeah.
exactly. So I understand the resentment towards it, but the thought process in our heads was honestly quite innocent and pure. It was just a case of, it's a PvP arena. We've seen for many years now that players have wanted, and we've seen from the community as well, say that they want PvP rewards to come from PvP content. And that PvP rewards should be focused around PvP as well. That players should be wanting to get into PvP to fight other players as opposed to PvP versus, you know, Predator versus Prey, I guess, PvP versus PVMer or Clue Scroller or of the likes. So really it was a case of, we've got a bunch of these rewards, they're coming from a PvP piece of content, we'll make it so that they can only be used in PvP. Hell, we'll even add in the option if you want, we can make them work in PVM in the wilderness as well, like how the Revenant weapons do. And at that point, it did feel like it was the right time to kind of say, you know what, actually, even though there are obviously other people out there who might not ever get these rewards and may be facing against people that have them, if we get the balancing right, so they're not that much different, maybe it is the right time to look at having this so that only those who are most interested in PvP get to say whether or not that they should be added, and it gives us a good indication of whether or not they're good, bad, broken, a little bit too underwhelming, for example.
The thought process does make sense
too.
I think the thought process does definitely make sense what you guys go for, but I think it comes back to the initial representation of what you're trying to pull, right? And it seemed very OP. It went across like the whole PvP community being like, well, you can hit like a 90 now, it's gonna be extremely OP. It's gonna be like a new Bofa, all this type of stuff. So then people was like, well, we didn't read the second blog, so we're just gonna go off what we first thought, you know what I mean? Which a lot of people will be doing that for. And probably why it failed again, I guess.
I didn't even I wasn't aware that it was done in two different situations either. I thought it was just the one.
That doesn't surprise me.
The first of these.
Hey, honestly, I haven't had much faith recently in the old polling system. I can't, you know.
It's good to have that insight from Jay though, because like, obviously he's like heard the first part, right? The OP part, and been like, well, this is gonna get polled. It's gonna be really OP, you know. Second part is balanced, like Ben was saying, Goblin. Sorry, and didn't know about it.
What I would say with the polls, and I don't want to step on SkillSpecs' toes, so I've heard him say this before as well. By opening up to last man standing, I would say a large majority of last man standing players are Ironmen. And that kind of still gave them the ability to spike vote a little bit. Because most Ironmen I know have at least won one game of last man standing. And yeah, they could still then vote on the poll and then vote no for everything.
That's fair.
It's true. It's true.
For the sake of devil's advocacy, I don't think anyone disagrees the fact that there is spike voting that happens. Ultimately, that is what it is. I don't think it's quite as much as people believe it is. But that's why we kind of have been looking at how we target some of these things and looking at the things that we quantify in order to allow people who have the information and understanding to vote on that. And unfortunately, it is a bit more of an iterative process as we go through. But ultimately, I do think we're going to end up with something that is essentially the people that know stuff, that know the most about the content that we're affecting are the ones that have a bigger say in that specifically. And it's not just PvP we can necessarily do that for as well. Like if we were going to make a change to Castle Wars or whatever, just for an example, we could look at the people who have played in Castle Wars recently and have X amount of Castle Wars experience and target it towards them. So what we were trying to do with the PvP community initially was quite a new thing overall. And you doing that is going to benefit us in other aspects too.
The question is how would you tell if it's a spite vote to a poll or not? You can't really tell, can you? in my eyes, at
unless we
least.
reach out to every individual player and ask them specifically why they voted the way they did, not really. But we can look at stats and make presumptions. They're never really good to go off, but it gives an idea at least. So one of the things that we looked into was the voting habits of what kind of account makeup made those votes in the first place, and it did identify some interesting stats and areas that we then thought about for future polls and restricted polls as well. I want to just quickly touch on something Rock mentioned as well, actually, because I do think it's important to address is the whole restricted polling. It has so much potential for change going forward as well. Obviously the Castle Wars example, we've got PVM that we can look at. One of the ones that I love using internally as a justification for us to continue doing it is if we got down the road of like, I don't know, Tombs of Massacre, Fauna Boss comes out and only 10 people have ever completed it, but we know that there's a mechanic that might be broken or there's some feedback we want to change and we're not quite sure whether or not we should do it. We can look to target just those who have managed to get to the last boss because, reasonably they're the only people that really understand what that change would mean. So there's a lot of potential for it. I think the problem with the PvP arena was that we never spoke about that potential. We never addressed the fact that we wanted to do it and why we wanted to do it before we'd already done it. And at that point, it's kind of too late. You already, made it seem like it's a case of trying to force things through, which is a lot of the sentiment that we saw. It's really not the case. As I say, it's just more innocent than that. We're just trying to really get the support for those that we feel like need it the most. So I would say I would expect to see a lot more restricted voting in the future as we continue to iterate on it. But we will kind of talk about it first, I think, before we go and do it again. Yeah. How did you feel about the
that is a good thing, because it...
Sorry,
No. This is really, really, really good, because it does help, hopefully, restrict a little bit of the old spite voting. Let's hope so. You say you're going to do some more in the future. Perhaps, you can target certain groups almost, can't you?
It's difficult with PvP though. I think restricted voting has always been difficult. I said many years ago, actually, there was a thread that came up on Reddit recently, going back to a stream that I was on when I had really bad hedgehog hair. And I was talking about how like restricted voting doesn't work because how do you identify the cohorts correctly? How do you make sure that you're not alienating other players and those that might get impacted by rewards should really have a say? But, in the time since then and now, we have thought about it more. We have looked at, okay, is it possible? And now I guess is the point where we're just testing it and seeing. I'm kind of keen to hear from the creators here, Dino, Rhys and SkillSpecs, what your thoughts are in terms of restricted voting for, let's just say for PvP specific, since we're having a PvP chat. Do you like it? What kind of things do your community say about it? If you had like an ideal restricted voting criteria, what would it look like? Those kind of things. Maybe
I can see both sides of it.
Rhys?
Sorry. I can see both sides of it, to be honest. And the fact that if you're trying to get new people into the wilderness, for example, they should have a say, but PvP Arena is trying to get them people into the wilderness as well by going through the PvP Arena, right? So if you want to go to the people that's already PvP'd and ask for their opinion first, sure, that's better than going to other people's opinions that never done it before, because they might want to try it out in the future. That's what I think.
Okay. How about you, SkillSpecs?
Honestly, I like I just said, Ben. I like it, bro. I like it. I'm a fan. It sucks there even is such a thing as spite voting in the first place. You know what I mean? That you have to do this in the first place. Kind of just is lame, But it's just a good idea, I believe.
I think something like that is always going to exist when you put a lot of control in the hands of the players, when players have so many different opinions and different play styles. Everyone, plays for their own reasons, right? So, I think it's always going to exist. It is a shame, but that's just the day, the age that we live in, and we have to work around it. But yeah, how about yourself, Dino? What are your thoughts on it? Have your community, for example, said anything about the whole restricted voting process?
Yeah, I think it's a lot better than no restrictions at all. It's just how you justify who can vote and who can't, I guess, is tricky. Because you don't want to exclude anyone who has a legitimate opinion, but you do want to get rid of the people who just vote no because they want to vote no. Oh no. SkillSpecs?
I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry. Nah, I read a comment in the chat, bro. That's just sideballed me, bro. And I didn't understand the question you asked, bro. So I'm sorry, man. I should have asked you to repeat yourself, bro. Instead, I've just hit you with some nonsense that made no sense, bro.
I think
Sorry.
spite voting in
okay.
general. What do you guys think? Do you think it happens more in PvP than like any part of the game, or what do you guys think in general?
I'll go if you want.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'll say, and this is speaking as someone who's like really pro PvP, like anyone who like browses the Feedback Discord knows what I'm about, or has seen me on other Q&As. But I don't necessarily think it's fair to call any example of a no vote a spite vote. I mean, you expect with any kind of democratic system, right, that people are going to vote in their own interest. Even if we'd like to live in some kind of idealized world where people are thinking long term about the health of the game always, that's not going to be the case. And while I don't disagree that there are some people who just see PvP vote no, I don't think it's fair to presume that like the reason that every PvP update doesn't pass is because people vote no, as opposed to framing it as PvP updates don't pass because the player base is no longer in a position where what we're proposing necessarily like works for them. And as much as I'd like love to kind of relive the glory days, you know, back in like 2013, 2014, where like 40% of the player base PvP'd every day. It was like the PvP community that kicked off the petition to get Old School in the first place. Like, the fact of the matter is that like it's not like that anymore. And if we want to try and see it thrive again and to see new blood come in, I think we need to kind of adapt what we do to be in line with the attitudes of a changing and ever evolving player base, as opposed to proposing stuff that maybe looks good and then people vote no, and then we can just scapegoat it and say, but it was spite voting, rather than like maybe taking some accountability for maybe we need to change the way that we think about PvP in 2022 because we're not in 2013 or 2007 anymore.
Yeah, I would entirely agree with what you're saying. It's based on like population of the player base as well, right? It's gone down quite a lot. There's a lot less PvPers, so people are just going to vote for what they're interested in.
Back then, right? would you argue and say that back then PvP was more of a moneymaker? It was better money making back then. Or would you say it's got worse?
Yeah,
I don't know, because the PvP was the best moneymaker in the game, right? I don't know. I remember.
Or the wilderness in general. Yeah, I see where you go from.
Yeah, but it's because your end game at the time was what, like KBD, Calfight Queen, and Dagonoth Kings and Barrows, and then God Wars came out 2008, like just after, back in like 07 and on like 07scape release. And I think like now part of the reason as well that the wilderness is so contentious is that like every time I won't talk about the whole like forced point, but I don't think like the rewards available to players in 2022 stack up versus what else is available, especially when you put it in the context of other changes like death reclaim costs, etc. I think there are problems with the current balance of like risk versus reward that people tend to only be in the wilderness if it's something they feel obligated to do, even if that's not really the case for some people. And I don't know, it drives a lot of the negativity. So it's like, and a lot of people I think will share the sentiment that like improving that reward balance when it comes to risk versus reward would probably help ameliorate the tensions between PvPers and others a little bit, and maybe kind of drive down the percentage of people no voting.
I've got an added thing for risk versus reward. I think when it used to be gravestones, and like I remember talking about this with Dino actually on this stream. Do you think the death mechanics should go back to where they used to be, or should it just be like if you die, you can get it back whenever you want? Because I think a lot of people that play their main game, they come into PvP and they're like the shocks that they lose their items, the shots that they go into Deadman and they die and they're like level 3 again after 3 lives, for example. It's all a very big shock factor that they're not really used to, and they're gonna end up not coming back. You know what I mean?
So
I don't
think
think we'll ever see a
time.
So yeah, so that was my. I can't ever see us going back to the whole 3-minute despawn.
Or like a balanced version.
I think it's purely a symptom of the age that we live in and the expectations of the general player these days. Like the way, obviously, that we used to play back in 2007 itself and stuff like that, that wasn't as much of a care as it is for a lot of people now. As the gaming sphere has gotten older and as the average player has tend to have gotten older, they feel that there is more of a more value in their time. Therefore, the loss is a lot more penalizing to them. I don't necessarily agree with it per se, but I can understand the fact that people are more miffed back then because we used to play for fun a lot more, whereas nowadays there's maybe a little bit less fun because we're essentially all adults and we all have our lives to deal with as well. I'm not saying it should be the same for someone that gets to play 24 hours a day and someone that gets to play 10 minutes after work before they've got to deal with the kids or whatever. But unfortunately, it's a symptom of the times we live in these days, and there has to be some sort of a balance that's found in there. But I can't see us ever going back to what it used to be, and the whole 3-minute items will get lost in PVM. It's just not that kind of gaming, that kind of player base anymore.
It makes sense, yeah.
Oh, fair enough.
See that as a
you don't
godsend,
think it wouldn't work these days? Hey?
Yeah, that's fair.
I do think it should be more punishing, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree, bro. I have to say that. Yeah,
I don't,
because there's nothing. Well, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I don't think that the system in place is punishing enough. Fees go somewhere, but obviously we also have the issue where there's lots of items in the game, and when items are not being taken out, that doesn't necessarily help with the balancing of the value versus the amount coming in and going out. So finding a middle ground somewhere would be really nice to do, whether that's perhaps just 15 minutes or something else. Then yeah, I'd like to see there be a review that is a bit more punishing on how players go, because at the end of the day, outside of the wilderness, if you've got the gold, you just run around in max gear, and if you die, you just say what the hell and go again. And there is people that I think a little bit more thought needs to go into what gear people can take, so it isn't just always, okay, I've got max, let's go.
Yeah, and then you can speak to death after you die, and he'll bring your gear from wherever you died straight to you. You know, it's like you don't even have to run back to where you died anymore. You know.
I appreciate that in terms of more of a convenience. Yeah.
Yo, you like that, do you? Oh, damn. Okay.
Well, I mean, when you look at it from especially one big thing, especially for PvP, is that has been said over the years, is that people basically want to go gear, re-gear, go out after every time they die, and have that in as little as time as possible. So that's obviously what we've got with the introduction of Purdue and things like that, which speeds it up a bit. And in PvP worlds, we've got the repair dummies in various places. So in order to make the players feel like they can get back to what they want to do quicker is a positive thing. But if it could be a bit more punishing in terms of the aspect to say, okay, I'm going to lose a little more. Or if I can't afford to pay for my reclaim fees, I'm going to start losing items as a result, and things like that. I think that's the way that I find that re-gearing being very quick and beneficial for, at least.
Yeah, when I mentioned Rhys versus War, I didn't mean like bring it back to the 3-minute, like I was like very punishing. But if there's like a leeway where they actually lose some items, and you have to think twice before like going up in max and just go max efficiently, killing all the bosses, then it's more of like a understandable like transition to PvP. When you do lose items, you're like, oh damn, this has happened to me before, type of thing.
I think someone in the chat kind of hit the nail on the head, and the onus, like obviously a large portion of it is on our side as well from a dev perspective, is that you can go to Vorkath, you can die every other kill you get, and still turn out with a profit.
I think what's important to remember, though, is that we've had players that have joined Old School now, and that's all they've ever known. They've not known the previous death mechanics. They've not known the fact that you only lose 100k to reclaim your items. That's all that they've known. And to try and change that, you'd be looking at alienating a very large portion of the player base. So when we first looked at changing the death reclaim system, if you remember, that took us around about 2 years to get through. And that was 4 or 5 years ago now, when we were first kind of like proposing it, because it literally was a case of we had so many new players that had never experienced the old system. They'd grown up with the game and built their accounts based off what they knew and what was available to them. So trying to make change and increase that risk, it's not as easy as just, oh, we'll just flip the switch and make it now cost 200k. Because I think for the average player, 200k per death, even if you are potentially making profit every other kill, it's still quite a hit from your bank. Like, you know, casual person who maybe only plays a couple of hours a week, but is really into the game and loves it, they're probably more vocal than the really high-end players. Those high-end players, you're not going to care about 100k most likely. It's just small change to you. You're going to make that back within 5 minutes, if that. Way less than that, in fact, especially when you've got like Next, for example, pumping out upwards of like 8 to 10 mil an hour. 100k is small change, but for the vast majority of players, because let's not forget that the high-level player base is still a small fraction compared to the entirety of Old School. It is built up with mid-level people that are relatively casual, that play the game in their own way, and to them, going from 100 to 200k might seem a lot. So, as much as it would be nice for us to look at increasing the risk outside of the wilderness, it's not that easy. Not to say that we would never do it. I think one thing that I personally would really like to see is us standardizing like death reclaim costs across the board. I don't like how some things cost less to reclaim your items than others, or some just don't have a cost, or at least didn't. And we're trying to improve in that one. But I think normalizing that across the board is probably about as good as we're going to get for now, until we want to look to do a complete overhaul, which is going to take a considerable amount of time, energy, and investment. And for what gain? On the premise that it might make people feel a little bit more comfortable going into the wilderness and losing their gear. I can tell you now, going from 100k to 200k, it's not going to do that. The people that don't want to go into the wilderness, they're not going to be more happy about going in because they're now losing more money outside of the wilderness as well. So I think we need to look at other things, and we actually have a topic to talk about what those other things might be. But first, there is something that I really want to kind of like pitch out and just quick fire responses, because I've got a potential proposal that I'd like to put forward to the Twitch chat that maybe we can get a poll in and just see what the players think. So my question is, back to the restricted voting, and we'll move on from the whole voting stuff after this, is what do you think about letting non-PvPers vote in PvP polls? Just across the board. Dino, go. Yes, no? Like it, hate it?
Oh, no. I'd say no, but I'm biased. I feel like you should have a say, but again, it goes back to I know you said spike voting is not too bad, but if you let everyone be able to vote, I don't think anything's going to pass, personally. Well, it isn't passing, as it is.
Okay. SkillSpecs, how about yourself?
No, just nah, bro. Not. I think it's good. It's a no. It's a no. There's no way I can say it nicely, bro, without sounding like a, just nah, not really, bro. I think it's a good idea, dude. Just restrict it. PKs only.
Okay, how about you, Rock?
Put on the PK updates, dude. It's time. A different approach, please.
I think it depends on the actual question you're asking, but yeah, in the end, I would say no. But it just depends, case by case. I would say yes.
It's hard for us because obviously we're all PKers, so it's like you just
we're probably very close net.
Yeah. Well, I didn't ask you it knowing that you'd all say, yeah, they should all vote. Like, there's obviously an agenda here with the question. I'm getting to a point. I want to try and propose a solution here. But, Rock, how do you feel about non-PvPers voting in PvP polls? You're muted.
That's the safest play, objectively.
Yeah. Just to leave myself mute. It's a no from me, dog.
Okay. And how about yourself, Goblin?
I'll be a dissenting voice. I'll say... I want to say yeah, but I think it's like about the way that like we're designing polls and the content that we're making. Because for me, I'm just thinking back to like during Game Jam when we spoke about like the Wilderness Expansion project, for example. I think reception for that was like really just like massively overwhelmingly positive, far beyond like the scope of PvP. So like while I get it, because it's like a niche community, and I think supporting that community is at odds with the wider community and at times. But I don't think all hope is lost when it comes to like involving everybody. I think it just depends on the content. Like I don't think many players would vote against like Bounty Hunter, for example. And I think the Wilderness Expansion would do pretty well, for example. So I don't know. I'm undecided. I'm not as biased though, because I play like a bunch of the game. I don't need to. Yeah.
That's fair. I think you raised a really good point, especially with something like the Wilderness Expansion rework. It was just the Wilderness Expansion Game Jam project, sorry, because that realistically would not just be PvP content, right? There's PVM content that's available in there, money-making methods that other people might want to have access to. So why shouldn't they be able to say whether or not that they that they want it, or at least be able to say they like it in its current iteration that we've proposed. So my take on it is that in an ideal situation, we would be able to very clearly specify which content is purely PvP, and that would be for just PvPers. But the reality is that there's so many instances where that's not the case. We have rewards that might then make it easier for you to die or easier for you to defend yourself. We might make it so that a reward in PvP that is aimed for PvPers ends up being best in slot in PvM unintentionally, or we introduce a new skilling method for some wacky manipulation that players like to do. So there are so many examples of it. What about if instead, and this is where I'd like to put another poll question into the chat, we considered changing the way that we handle restricted votes to more of a weighted system, for example. So let's say that we have a poll question that is revolved around PvP. It's open to everyone to vote. Everyone's allowed to vote on it. There are no restrictions. However, if you're an account that is maybe more experienced in PvP activity, your vote's worth 2 points instead of 1. So that way, the PvPers who are really a smaller community have a much stronger voice with their smaller amount of numbers, but it means that the majority are still able to have their say and get involved. And for the most part, the balance of scales will probably still in favor of the non-PvPers, but it at least opens it up to not having this animosity between, oh, I should be able to vote, but I can't because it impacts me. PvPers then also be able to have their say and have their say worth more as a result.
Yeah, I see where
Do
you're
you
coming
think
from.
that could work?
the weight
Do you
system.
think, yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea.
I like how one of the
Just-
options in the poll is dislike it respectfully. Thanks, Light.
Yo, Ayiza, what about, okay, the polling system is gone. What about completely
No,
gone? Do you think
next
you guys,
question.
what do you
It's the game's entire identity. It's like every like press interaction. Like as much as I get it, and as much as sometimes maybe it like seems restrictive. Like you can't do it. You can't do it. Like nor should we. It's like it's the
What if the
lifeblood
poll
and the
system is
backbone
gone
of
for
the game.
PvP?
Hold on.
No,
How
no.
about we just say this is definitely a topic that warrants its own stream entirely. So let's not go there and let's talk about the other
Yeah,
things for
yeah.
now, because we're going to change anything from this stream. I can promise you that much. And I don't want to spend the next 40 minutes talking about polling
Moving
when
on.
we're talking
Sorry.
about
Moving
PvP. So let's. I tell you what, there is a point in here. I'll talk a little. This is going to be really quick, but there's a point in here that basically says, what did we learn from the PvP survey about what players want? So if you're unfamiliar, we put out a survey that basically asked you to prioritize which updates we should focus on in terms of PvP. I can very easily and confidently say that the top 3 voted kind of like areas to focus on were the wilderness expansion idea that was brought through from Game Jam, very strong #1 contender, followed closely by both wilderness quality of life suggestions and general kind of like reworks of the area, and Bounty Hunter. So they all got very similar, but wilderness expansion was by far the most popular. There's a lot more that came out of the survey as well, but not stuff that I'm really in a position to be able to fully share. But those are the top 3 at least. So yeah, wilderness expansion, wilderness quality of life, and Bounty Hunter definitely the most popular within the community as a whole.
Good.
And we saw people that aren't interested in PvP filling that out, people that don't play the game anymore filling that out as well. So a really, really good amount of responses. That was great to see. So thank you everyone for kind of getting involved in that one. Does that come as a surprise to anyone here in the call?
That surprises
don't
me.
think so.
Yeah, it caught me by surprise.
It's a very big surprise for me. A lot of the feedback and the discussion that tends to happen, specifically within the PvP feedback Discord, at least, is very BH heavy, because that was something that people looked back fondly on in Old School as a really positive time for them. But for overall the expansion to come out on top, a little bit biased given worked on preparing it, but it surprises me, but it's a very good surprise.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely happy with it. I think it just kind of shows that we haven't really had a Woody update for a long time. There's been lots of sort of like mini games outside. The actual Wilderness update was, what was it? The God Capes, I think. God Cape 2s.
No, we moved the entrances
Nah,
and exits
man.
further apart.
Oh yeah, apart from the
Yeah,
Red Cave
we-
entrances, 20
You're being greedy. You need to wind your neck in.
Sorry, you're right.
Say sorry right now.
No.
David.
It's nice. It would be nice if the focus can be actually on like the general wilderness again, rather than like PvP, but safe in this little corner, you know?
Yeah. It shows that people that do wilderness are kind of starved. And they're looking for something like that. And it was such a good idea what you guys created with that nation. I love it. Seems like other people do as well.
It would be a big project, but it did do very well on the survey. It got like 13,000 responses almost, so that was good to see.
Yeah, it was really, really good to see. All right, we've covered a couple of these topics, so I'm not going to go over every one of them. I think I wanted to kind of like delve into why other communities seemingly dislike the PvP community so much and how we can avoid like dividing it. But I think a lot of the conversation we had before about risk versus reward and how the player base has shifted has kind of covered that. So what if instead we focus towards how can we maybe make it more worthwhile or enjoyable for less experienced players in terms of PvP to enjoy engaging in PvP situations or just entering the wilderness in general? Do you have any thoughts on that? Having XP in like lower levels of the wilderness is a good thing. Because if it's in higher levels of the wilderness, new players obviously get killed by people that are extremely strong. But if it's in lower levels, then they can do what they want. For example,
Sorry, Rhys, I'm going to have to take you off the stream now. Bad take. You mentioned XP in the wilderness. I don't like it.
Fair enough.
It's not a bad idea.
I get it, but like, do you think that a new player's like or a less experienced player's experience is going to improve if you tell them that the best training method for them is to go to the wilderness, where like,
I see that point. Yeah,
Gary Jmod comes round and slaps them? It is something to aim for, but there's so many areas in early game that would look to improve. I don't think shoving them into the wilderness would be the most inviting of places. And I'm generally against XP in the wilderness now anyway, because of that shifting player base kind of like mentality. There are, at the end of the day, there is a niche community out there that look to chase for the most XP per hour that you can achieve in a skill at any one time, right? And if the best method for that is in the wilderness, well, we're essentially restricting them from being able to achieve that entirely unless they pay for protection or hope that they just don't get hit off on. And that's not a good gameplay experience. Maybe if we had like more middle
amount
ground.
Of people though, right?
Does it matter? Like PvP is a small amount of people skill specs, but we want to look at focusing on
you said the
improving stuff for you.
wilderness as a whole, brother.
Yeah, but like
I don't
at the end of the day, you can't kind of like look at it in the sense of like we want things for us, so everyone else should suffer because like we care about it more, because that is still a community out there that don't like that interaction. So why should it be that we focus on PvP over them and make their experience worse just because we feel like it might be a better idea?
Yeah, I see what your point is. Yeah, understand.
I'd be more happy with like middle ground experience rates that give you really good GP. So like it's not the best XP, you get the best XP outside of wilderness. But if you want good XP and gold at the same time, the wilderness is there for you. So maybe I should have said that instead, Rhys. Like best XP per hour is a no from me personally. Carry on now. Sorry.
It needs something. It's like Goblin said earlier. PvP was sort of like end game. It was like best GP. Whereas now it's outperformed by everything outside of the worldy, really. And if you're not going to give it XP either, it needs like one of the two, 100%. Because why are you going to kill a boss in the worldy that gives you a mil an hour when you can kill Vorkath faster in best in slot gear for, I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm going to get flamed, like 4 mil an hour, 3 mil an hour? You're just not.
2 to 4, depending on how much you're zooming.
Yeah, it needs, if you're not going to get XP, it definitely needs GP. Because otherwise there's no reason to do it.
I think that specific example gets used all the time. I understand why, but I think it's important to recognize, and I'm not disagreeing, by the way, I definitely want to see bosses in the wilderness that give better GP per hour than they currently do. And I believe I said a couple of streams back, when we talked about what our intentions were with the wilderness boss rework, that we were looking to, make the GP per hour consistent with other bosses that exist out there. But you have to remember, to get the top end of GP per hour at Vorkath, you need pretty decent gear. That's got a barrier to entry because of the cost to get the gear in the first place, and you need to have completed a bunch of quests. Whereas you can just sand crab an account up and go to rev caves and make 2 to 3 mil an hour with relatively like no gear or stats, right? So there is definitely a difference there, and that's, that barrier to entry does warrant something like Warcraft giving you the more GP per hour. And I think what we've missed though is the reward aspect in the wilderness to kind of like offset the risk and balance it out with the accessibility.
What about because there's an idea where it'd be locked behind like Fremennik quests, right, in the Wildy Rejuvenation. And if you have something like Warcraft where you have to do loads of quests to actually do it, but in the wilderness, wouldn't you have that where you can't just start a new account to do whatever method it must be? I feel like that's like a really good idea.
Even some of the bosses, I know not in the current state because it's safe spotting, but not so much revs. I was more so talking about like Callisto. Like you won't just get a level 40 of a magic shortbow, go and kill a Callisto. Like you will like rev imps or whatever, They're not easy bosses. They are at the moment due to safe spots, but that's getting changed soon, I think. So I think them sort of bosses should have a considerable amount more GP. More than revs anyway, because revs are pretty easy to kill. But like the actual bosses is what I was aiming at, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, for what it's worth, like completely agree on that front. The reworked bosses will do exactly that. They will be way more GP per hour than they are currently. That should better match to what is available outside of the wilderness. I just wanted to just talk on that point because everyone always uses Warcraft but forgets about the gear cost and the quest point, as I mentioned. And you don't need that in the wilderness, right?
That is true. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. You can literally go level 10 and go kill rev imps and get a 40 more crowbow if you're lucky enough, right? But how's that?
Good luck with that one.
Hey, but it is possible. It is possible.
I feel like I may have derailed it a little bit, so I'm gonna kind of like bring it back to the whole: what could we do to make it more worthwhile or enjoyable for less experienced players when they engage in the PvP in wilderness? Rhys, you suggested about having obviously the training methods that are lower level wilderness. Anyone have anything else?
It's kind of like, again, I touched on earlier, I don't want to just keep saying it, but it just needs to be up to date. It's at the moment it hasn't really changed for years, and there's been so many better methods, even from XP, because am I right in saying the Wildy Agility course used to be pretty good back in the day, whereas now it's so outdated. Same with green dragons. No one kills green dragons anymore. It just needs relevant methods, be it XP or money. GP, sorry. It's just massively outdated at the moment. It hasn't really changed for years.
Well, I don't know, man. I know you don't like me saying it, Mr. Ayiza, out of the word XP, but I don't know, man. Could it be such a bad thing? Having a good XP method coming from the wilderness? I don't know. I don't know, man.
I just don't believe it will get you the results that you think that it will. I think it will just be short-term gain for like long-term increased resentment. We've seen that, and we see that now with the Wilderness Chaos Altar. It's one of the best methods to train your prayer, and the one area that we get the most complaints about, people finding it frustrating to train there. So I think the balance should be more towards it's the best training method because you get gold at the same time or reward, as opposed to it being the best XP.
Right.
I'm completely on board with that entirely.
Sorry. I think that example is because like there's not enough around the whole wilderness, so people concentrate to the Chaos Altar instead of going to wherever location it may be, especially multi-wise. Like I can see your point why XP you don't want it. You might annoy more people than it actually helps. I see that.
Yeah,
Definitely
upset the high level
definitely plays a
community,
part
man.
in it.
Oh god.
It's not just
It
the high
doesn't
level
upset
community
the-
though, right? Go on, sorry, Goblin.
Do you want to? It doesn't upset the HLC though, because like Wildy Altar is literally slower than Gilded House Altars with runners anyway. It's just cheaper, which is like, I think one of the most bizarre things about the Wildy Altar is that like you save so many bones. It's like really good for irons, right? Because you're not buying bones, you're saving half the time. Unless you're a hardcore iron, obviously. But like you're not encouraged to risk anything. You just roll up, you suicide, respawn, come back, do it again. But like in terms of being balanced around, it's not BIS XP, but you're technically making money because you're saving half the cost. It's like pretty good. I think Black Chins are also kind of okay. maybe like a non-wildy equivalent where you didn't have the extra trap that you get in the wildy would be okay. But it's like, I think on the point of like good XP methods is that like they're both really good XP methods that save a bunch of GP, but I don't think they're like crazy active. I think you'd have to add a lot for it to have that kind of impact. I think like dark crabs are okay, maybe kind of. They're like really AFK, right? But again, they're not like big drivers. And I think there's like a really delicate line to balance with. Go ahead.
Got a guy for 400 crabs the other day, Mr. Goblin, bro, and I thought to myself, oh, it's going to be so much money, bro. I PC it and it's 260k, bro, and I'm like, oh, God. And he must have been there for ages, man, so there's definitely not much money coming in from the methods in the wilderness right now in terms of that. You know, even with black chins, but black chins is the best wilderness money-making method, right? Surely? You would say so, if you didn't take into account revs. That's what we have right now, black chins.
Yeah,
Skilling
probably
method,
say so.
yeah,
No?
probably.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like GP is all it needs. That's all it had back in the day, really. Like there will be agility core, sure, but no one was risking anything. But like green dragons back in the day were what, like a 400k an hour moneymaker back when 400k an hour was a lot of money an hour. Like I don't know. I think the XP point's interesting, and there's like probably stuff to do, but I don't think it's like the big fix. Not that
I can see why it won't be a good thing.
GP matters most.
It's good to have a good insight like that. See you guys' points on there. Why XP might not work, and it seems pretty reasonable what you guys are saying.
I think it works
I'm just excited to see what you have to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
that
when
was the point of the... Oh, sorry, Rhys, go on.
Especially when you said about low levels, I thought low levels coming to the wilderness might be like a good stepping stone to them doing PvP in the future, but it's like so hard on, especially in low level wilderness, and they're getting killed all the time trying to do this cool method or whatever, and it might not be worth it in the future for the game or PvP. Yeah, I see that.
Well, I think we tried to address like a lot of the points that we've been talking about here, especially in terms of like the whole balance between best XP or GP with the actual wilderness expansion, and maybe that's why it ended up being so popular, because we have noticed that trend of focusing too far on the XP side just brings in more negative sentiment than it ends up bringing in activity. And as Goblin said, the really good point is that if you do end up having things that give you the best skilling XP per hour, then people are just incentivized to just not risk as much or not risk anything at all. And then in reality, what are we actually doing for the wilderness by adding that in there then? Creating a hotspot, potentially? Maybe, but if that hotspot, this is something that I think Mod Kirby once tried to explain. Didn't get the words out as best as he'd intended to. But in order for those areas to thrive, like you as the player who is going there to not get PK'd, you don't want it to be active. So the more active it becomes, if it is a hotspot, the less inclined you are to want to go. So then you either have more worlds or you have more of these different hotspots to serve the same purpose. But that's quite intensive in terms of resource requirement. You know, if we were to add 5 or 6 similar training methods just so that we spread out the activity and created multiple different hotspots so that more people were inclined to go there, surely there's got to be something else that's better to do than just that. And if we can focus on fun and engaging content that basically promotes people going in with risk, because they know that even if they die every single time they go there, all they need to do is get 1 or 2 or 3 kills in their whole trip and they'll have made their money back plus some. That's where I think the edge is over skilling. It's about getting the money, going in for your quick kills, in and out, risking it in that moment, knowing that you have to take risks to be able to get your reward at the same time, and making the PKers essentially work for their prey, rather than it just being everyone congregated in one small area doing skilling activities, wearing nothing, for some skilling supplies that you'll then bank and complain about the fact that you didn't get a huge amount of money from. So,
yeah.
I think we have Rock coming back now. Welcome back, Rock. Good to see you.
Hello.
Sorry about that. Had to quickly dip out for a minor emergency.
No worries
I like where
at
the
all.
topic was
What
going.
about... Sorry, welcome back, Rock. Mr. Ayiza, bro, to talk about you were talking about. What about the Wildy Slayer Master? You know what I mean? The only point to do Wildy Slayer right now is what the increased reward points, right? And the Laran keys, the best thing, the Laran keys from the Wildy Slayer as well, bro. And that's just a souped up Konar chest, right? So I don't know, maybe these could be reworked too. I don't know. Look into the chest, because I'll be honest, I've tried hopping up there, and in so many hops, I've never found anyone. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how anyone finds anyone up there.
I'm surprised as well, because I see some people like, oh, I got 100 keys, I'm gonna go open them all and not bank throughout the whole time.
Bro.
Like, I would literally be sweating so bad. But we did recently we did make changes to the Wilderness Slayer Cave to make them a bit more profitable. We added a few more rewards, the superiors and stuff like that. So they have had like a pretty big bump up in terms of GP per hour, but the reality is it's still nowhere near close to where it needs to be, given the fact that they're in multi, right? So definite work that needs to be done there too. And that, I think, is a really good example of it, right? It doesn't offer you the best Slayer experience per hour in the game, still gives you pretty damn good XP, and I think some tasks now are actually even better in there because of the fact you can use the cannon where you can't normally on certain tasks. But even
is
then,
that a recent change?
Yeah, we made it so that the cannon was available for the whole. But we moved the stalagmites.
Okay.
Some of the ones were blocked so that you couldn't effectively use your cannon there properly. And I think it's the only place in the game where you can use a cannon to lure in Necreals to barrage them, right? Otherwise, you have to either use another account or lure them yourself. But it's really insignificant. Like, no one cares about it because, as I said, the reward isn't good enough, even though we improved it. So we need to do better. I got a pretty hot topic here that I want to bring up. I know Dino is going to be absolutely frothing to discuss this one in particular.
Oh no.
So it's basically one part of like making it more worthwhile or enjoyable for less experienced players. We introduced some changes, and our mindset was, let's make the wilderness a little bit more approachable, so that when players are there, the main long-standing complaints that they've had for many years are no longer a thing, and those came down to skull tricking. So we removed the ability for people to skull trick you. All you have to do is select the box that says, don't give me a skull, and there is no way possible that you can get a skull other than if you're attacking someone who attacked you back first. If you haven't enabled that yet, by the way, please go and do it, because you never have to worry about being skull tricked again. And then there was also the complaint around singles, and in 1v1 wilderness, you could be in a situation where 20 or so people could essentially pile in on you, transfer all their different specs one at a time, and you would have a pretty hard time. As a casual player, I think it's almost impossible for you to survive that. Experienced players would most certainly be able to tank it through, but for the average player, because I think that's where the complaints came from, it was seen as being unfair. You're getting an unfair advantage, and it doesn't feel in the spirit of what a 1v1 area in the wilderness is meant to be. Now, I know there are a lot of opinions on whether the wilderness should or shouldn't be fair, but we looked to introduce the PJ timer, which essentially made it so that you could only ever be in combat with the person who attacked you. And then after that, you've got 12 seconds where that continues, and then someone else can attack you, so that you're no longer in this situation where it was a case of one person's specs steps under another person's specs, and that continues on. Now, I think the skull time, the anti-skull prevention is pretty unanimously like one of those things where we've just accepted it. Those that were against it because they were making bank from skull tricking have kind of just got over it and stopped doing it now. I think there are still some that do it, though, outside Ferox Enclave. Again, please enable the option. But I know that PJ Timer is pretty contentious, and there's been a lot of discussion around it and how it is, from those that are engaged in the wilderness especially, the perception is that it's essentially killed the wilderness off entirely. And made it less active than it's ever been before. So I'm kind of like keen to hear, not so much what your opinions on the PJ Timer are, because I can unanimously say that I think Dino and Rhys both dislike it. I'm not sure about SkillSpecs.
Oh, they're so ready. They're so ready to speak, buddy. He's ready, bro.
The first thing they're going to do is say that they hate it and that it should be removed, and the fact that they can't play with friends anymore. I think really what I want to kind of do is maybe more tailor the conversation here to the PJ Timer exists as it does currently. We are open to looking at changing it. What changes do you think could be made to the PJ Timer that would appeal to more groups? So this is those that currently don't like it, those that do like it, and those that just, quite frankly, have no idea what we're talking about.
In general, I think nothing. It has to be a PJ timer or no PJ timer, in my personal opinion. If you change it back to like 9.6 seconds, I think teams will just take over the wilderness where it won't be fair. You won't be able to kill said teams. I'm talking about a pyramid scheme earlier, where if you have a team at the top, them teams won't be able to get killed by other teams, if that makes sense. Because it's so easy to survive on 9.6 second PJ timer, especially when you got more people than the other people that you're trying to kill. So yeah.
Do you think, Rhys, there are any changes to the current system though that would be able to help both sides? Doesn't necessarily have to be reducing the time of it, but anything else that we could do around the wilderness, or?
I mean, other than what we've been talking about earlier, where you bring money into the wilderness to bring activity up, I don't think like you can change the PJ timer itself. But other than that, it has to be monetary value that people are going to gain.
Yeah, some kind of multi-cave or something, bro, that they have a reason to go fight for this multi-area, do you know what I mean? That's the only way to keep people happy. They gotta have a reason, you know what I mean?
Wilderness boss rework is going to be multi, by the way, for what it's worth, so just keep that in mind. For those that maybe are on the stream not aware, we have said all of the bosses will be in multi as they are currently, so. Dino, come on.
You threw me when you, like, I was ready. I was so ready to answer, and you like changed it to like give suggestions for the PJ timer, and like I don't have any. I kind of agree with Rhys. I don't think you can sort of go half and half. It's either PJ timer or no. And again, I know you know my opinion on that. It's just a hard one. I think the issue with having no PJ timer was obviously teams were getting to the point where they were overpowered, especially with some of the new gear out. You know, back in the day, there was no volatiles, there was no loads of overpowered gear. I was struggling to, if I was solo PKing, I found a hard time tanking a half TB. It might be because I was bad, but with like the buffers and everything now, it was tricky.
Oh god.
But I think there were ways you could counter that by, I don't want to say this and then have the chat just absolutely blow up on me, but like introducing flasks or stuff again, like other ways of tanking rather than just like being like, this doesn't work. Let's just make it all 1v1s. And like even now we're stuck with, it's still the same. Before teams were at the top of the food chain, whereas now it's just the solo maxes, because there's always going to be something at the top in the wilderness. And now the solo good PKers don't have to be scared of teams. So they just go in max gear. They're just in max gear, max DPS. And then the little like noobs like Goblin just get destroyed by them, you know?
Called out, mate.
The gazelles.
I was reading chat, but that was really not fair.
I think to expand a little bit on the flasks, and I think that's something that you've like brought up with me and Goblin in the feedback Discord as well, Dino, is that when a lot of people think flasks, so even the dogs don't like it. When a lot of people think flasks, they think about the effect it will have on things like PVM, etc. But one thing that I think some people tend to forget is that we have blighted versions of potions that can only be used inside the wilderness. If we were to consider those to be flask only and come from PvP in various ways, whether that's LMS, PvP arena, etc., then you're quelling the idea that flasks will be like massively affecting PVM, which it doesn't need, but at the same time offering something to modify the experience within PvP in the wilderness itself. So it's kind of the system that we've already created inherently allows us to attempt that mechanic in a way which is much more safer for the game.
Yeah, as far as flask, like I say, I just that's like a passing. Definitely not if the PJ timer. Flask with a PJ timer would be.
Yeah, I think you mean if just single in general, yeah, not single plus.
Yeah, but yeah, if and I know this wasn't Aiza's question, we're writing it and stuff. But if it went back, it would have to look at like tanking methods, you know. But yeah, in terms of PJ timer, I don't think there's they're all just 1v1s. So you're either going to be better than the person you're fighting or you're not. It's very rare there's a fair fight, and a lot of the time there is a fair fight. The people don't want to be in it. They'll just freeze and log out because it's that easy, and they'll find someone who's worse than them. And a lot of the lower down players just kind of get farmed.
What if we changed it so that you couldn't do that anymore? So that you couldn't log out whilst you were frozen?
I then
No.
think it would be too punishing. It's
Yeah.
I'm all for
I'm
it.
high
But
on
then
that
maybe,
right now, man.
then maybe
Where's the-
bring
where's the
like the
balance, though?
NPCs. That's the thing. There isn't really. I don't know. I don't think there is a balance.
Yeah,
with
there
PJ
definitely
timer.
isn't a balance. It's too safe right now, but I think that suggestion specifically will be too hard on. I mean, if we can find a balance, that'll be perfect, wouldn't it?
I
don't know
guess
what that would be,
from
to be
my
honest.
what I would really like to understand is why I'm probably going to get enemies for this, but why PvP is so scared of dying to PvPers?
Money.
Why is it too punishing? Like, if you can't log out whilst you're frozen, but you're complaining about the fact that PvP is too safe because you can log out whilst you're frozen. So surely the solution is to prevent that. So now you've got those fair fights where you're locked into combat with one person. If you want to escape, it's a case of you either tank all the way to the edge, or you tank out your TB duration and you teleport away instead.
I think the problem with that is that it'll become a meta where the meta has already shifted to that, where you'll be in the minimal amount of switches but have a lot of bruise on you because you have to tank out. You know what I mean?
Well, you should always be somewhere where you shouldn't be like locked in a 1v1. If you don't want to be in that fight, there should be ways out of it. Like, say you're in Deep Breath Caves, level 38. If a crystal guy gets on you and you have to tank to ditch, you're not surviving that, no matter who you are, unless you bring, like Rhys says, like 16 brutes.
Yeah, it would be a massive meta shift that you've already kind of seeing lately, where people are bringing a lot more food, even though it's already safe now, and people are bringing this type of gear. So imagine when it's like very hard to escape because you can't log out. I remember Soul Mission actually did that suggestion with not logging out, and it seems very hard on. If you can change, like, I don't know what you would change, to be honest. I need to think about it more. I need to think about it more.
It's a hard question because I'm gonna put my foot in it. But
Wait, Ayiza though, but what? Sorry, Rock, go, buddy.
I was going to say, is there an element of it where, because the people that enjoy spending more time in the wilderness, and it goes back to that point where the wilderness as an area isn't that great for making money, that it feels like that you need the ability to be able to make more money to be able to afford to spend more when you're PKing. So a case of, if the activities you can do inside it generate more that allow you to do that, then you would be willing to risk more against other PKers in the first place.
it's a hard one. I don't think there will ever be a time where you'll go PKing and you'll be like, if I die, that's what no one's going to go to die. Like, they will always try to play it as safe as they can.
Die, yeah.
Unless you're skill-specs. Yeah, sorry.
Thinking about it, if you... Jay.
Recently, bro, it's been a lot worse than it has been in the past. Well, yeah. Nah, bro, I was gonna say, Mr. Ayiza, bro, what gives you the impression that PKers are afraid to fight other PKers? I see another PK, I lick my lips. You know, I know Dino. I watch Dino streams every day. He sees someone else, he licks his lips.
I think you're a rare breed, SkillSpecs.
You're built different.
Yeah, you're built different, mate. You're based.
Yeah, that's anecdotal.
Oh, okay.
A lot of PKs, if they see someone who's good, they'll just focus on escaping straight away because they just want to attack like the mid levels or the lower tiers.
A change you could
do. Just go on. Sorry, Goblin. Go. My bad.
I wanted to come at the PJ timer thing from like a different side of things, and like whenever, especially because it comes up a lot in the PvP feedback Discord, and it feels generally like a lot of the reason people miss it is like being able to PK with friends, right? And you've gone from small teams. And in old singles, I mean, I rolled up with Dino on some streams and SimTB people. Like, we've all been there. But there were some times, like in old singles, for example, where like even if a team with more numbers got on you, you could like still outplay them, etc. And now the jump is either you're 1v1 or you're potentially like 100v100 or something like that, right? Given that like it feels like a lot of the old appeal of singles was like fall-ins and like small team activity. Is there some kind of middle ground that still recreates what people liked about PvP before the PJ timer that might not necessarily be the removal of the PJ timer? Like, is there something else that scratches the same itch, or is it in your mind just like do it or don't? There's like it's just gone, it's chalked.
Yeah, go on, Dan.
So you go, Rhys. No, there you go.
I think when I was talking about it earlier with the 9.6 second PJ timer, the meta wouldn't be what you'd expect, and it'll be too easy for teams like myself or like Dino that can team on one player, where You have to be a 12-second PG timer, or there has to be no PG timer. But when I'm thinking about it, a way to maybe have a middle ground is, do you know when you try and log out or teleport on Deadman, where you have like a timer before you log out, you have to stand still. That will make it so if, for example, you get like a freeze near the end of your freeze time, you can't just run away and run around a rock or something and log out. A lot easier. Not a lot easier, sorry, a lot harder to log out. There's some type of middle ground, maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was getting at with the not being able to log. It wasn't necessarily just because you're frozen you can't log. It would be extending the logout timer in essence to some degree, or adding a timer, just that as a general concept. Sorry, go on, Donnie.
No, I just got sad. Rhys mentioned Deadman mode. And I wanted SkillSpecs to do his little woo.
Where's the woo?
Sorry, man, I wasn't ready. Hey, yeah, that's a good topic. Are we gonna be discussing that?
In terms of Deadman, I think we have enough time to kind of
Yeah.
like go over everything that we'd be able to with Deadman. So plus as well, I don't really know what we could say, because if you're looking for more news on Deadman, I don't have anything to share with you. I would love to talk about Deadman as a whole, but I think there are so many topics that we can still talk about that maybe it warrants us all coming together for another stream in a few weeks, another month or something like that, and continuing on where we've left off, because there are so many points in here that we've not gone over just yet. So I am unfortunately for you SkillSpecs dodging, as much as I'd love to hear that woo continue.
I've been dodged, mate. It's okay. No, I should have asked you. I should have pounced on you the second I got you in the call. But dead man.
That was the woo. You got hyped.
But Deadman is really important to us. We really like it. I think, though, one thing that I can say is that we're going to have to look at making some changes to the way that Deadman works, in all honesty, especially with the current format that we have in place with the 1v1 finals, because they're just too susceptible to well, quite frankly, very... I was about to swear and then I realised I can't. I'm on the live stream. But people that just aren't so nice out there, we tried so hard to prevent that from happening, and we eventually got there during the rerun that we did. But by that point, it was already kind of like too late in my eyes. So I'd love to see Deadman come back and have a different way to end the event that doesn't essentially incentivize people to try and take off our servers, because something that people kind of just don't really take into account is that it's basically impossible to prevent it from happening. There are organizations that are so much bigger than what we are that get taken down. Like the whole PlayStation network can get taken down. Battle.net as a whole can be brought down. Microsoft services and all that kind of stuff. So to think that little old Jagex based out of Cambridge are also trying to prevent that from happening. It is an arms race, and as much as we try, I think it's always going to be a risk, and I would much rather see Deadman be a celebration of the PvP community and those that kind of like want to get involved and learn and swap and stuff, rather than turn into this huge cesspit of negativity that it creates when eventually we do get problems. So either LAN or something else in terms of the format.
Yeah, I loved what you guys did with the previous Deadman. It was all, everyone loved it until the final, which I agree with. If it's not like I think you can run, the Deadman was so fun with the relics and whatnot. You can do changes like that, but not have a final, I guess. If that's something that's not going to be viable for you guys. Seasonals
Can I
as
ask
well.
one more question, Mr. Ayiza?
45 doesn't
One
have
more
a
question.
finals. Look at that. It's one of those
That's what I was
things.
about to
If it
ask,
was
man.
seasonals,
No.
if it was seasonals and like where there was no end, but you as much as fun is a reason to play, the way that people tend to think these days is that there needs to be kind of like a reason at the end of it.
Yeah, I could see what you're saying. Yeah,
Can
I
you
think
tell us
45
anything
is
about
good.
45?
No.
Rock?
I think 45 just way too like put on the back burner to like compare it to though. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Let's
I
get
think
a
45 is too
46
far
going,
gone.
mate.
Well, World 46 is taken.
Oh.
Not anymore.
Theoretically, yes, a 46 style thing is possible, but I think you have to remember about whether it's worth it or not. Like, for something to go on for a few weeks to a month, or however, and then it could be exactly the same as what 45 is now. It's something that kind of really needs to be investigated before we actually decide anything we can do about that. As much as I'd love to just say, yeah, let's do it, it's not that simple.
I don't think people
would-
realized as to how long World 45 Deadman mode was gonna go, Rock. Personally, I did not know it was gonna be around this long. Do you know what I mean? Like, that blew my mind. And even with,
I mean, it was a
small player
permanent
base, you
version
guys
of
still
Deadman.
keep it up. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that surprised some other people too. Me personally, I don't know.
I think that is something we will eventually look at. Obviously, we have the PvP dedicated team within the Jagex development team, or the Old School development team now. We do have a few things we need to deliver first, obviously. But the idea is that once the wilderness boss is there, it's kind of taking a look at things like the survey that we ran recently that Ayiza mentioned, and kind of deciding from there and having PvP development be very much player-driven focus on what we do and how we do it, and kind of basically using that as the forefront of how things could look in the future, where we do have teams that are dedicated to specific things, and it's the players that get involved in those specific things that drive the development forward. And I honestly cannot wait for us to be done with the wilderness bosses. As much as I'm looking forward to it, I kind of want to get to the point of go, okay, we've delivered what we promised. Now let's deliver what people want, and get back to that as the ethos as what that team is.
Okay.
I see.
I just quick. It's like the last thing I say, and then I'll shut up because I know it's 6:30. But personally, would be like massively in favor of the idea of not like seasonals with finales, but just like, I mean, there are other games whose entire business model is just run it back for 3 months, change it a little bit. In some cases, a lot. And I don't know that we have like the dev time to change it a lot. But like PO, like Path of Exile, Diablo 3. Are both doing like really well, and their entire business model is just seasonal game mode, run it back, over and over and over again, and it works. And I don't think that it wouldn't work with Deadman, for example. Not that we have like the dev resource to change it every 3 months, but I wouldn't be personally opposed to like fighting to bring it back as like a 3-4-6.
That in itself is the issue, and the last thing I'd want to do is go back to a system where we're essentially given a week to try and work out how to update Deadman before we launch the next season. It's pretty obvious that to people back then it just didn't work, and running 4 seasons a year kind of put pressure on us. We put pressure on ourselves too in what was allocated towards it, but at the end of the day it needs the resource and time to be done properly. And if we were to switch the PvP focused team that we've got right now onto that, you wouldn't get anything else. It's just the position we're in right now.
What I would quickly say about Deadman is, I personally, this might surprise some people because I'm obviously massive on Deadman. I don't think a permanent Deadman will ever work. I think it's designed to kind of kill itself off after, I don't know how long, a month, 2 months. I don't think a permanent one will ever work. I would love to see a seasonal, or maybe a yearly, or every 6 months or something, like they used to be, but just without a final. Every 99% of the people I know would still play Deadman if there was no prize pool at the end. Like, we don't play for the prize pool; you play because you enjoy it.
Well, the finals is different, yeah. Kind of like leagues, there's no final, right?
You know what,
Max is in the chat right now, bro. You know he's thinking
I've ever agreed with
he's
you.
going to win.
No way.
First
time.
I think that's definitely a note to end the stream on.
Yep. On a high.
Absolutely is. No, but I think you're right. We've kind of like proven it before as well. In essence, World 45 is a good example of that. My ideal would be seasonal Deadman happens every year, and then permanent Deadman gets reset according to the rule set from the previous seasonal, and that continues until the next season is available. You then play the next season, the permanent server then gets reset with the new season rule set. So it's a constant cycle, but always changing. So I think that was actually a suggestion from Husky, actually. So credit to him for planting the seed initially. Anyway, we have definitely ran over, and I'm going to get in serious trouble. So I'm going to say that we're going to have to call it here. However, I would love to have you all back on at some point in the near future to carry on over the other topics that we've not been able to get into. Hopefully those at home have enjoyed the stream. hopefully yourselves that have joined me here today have also enjoyed yourselves. I know it's difficult doing these things remotely with the delay and stuff like that of over talking everyone, but I really appreciated all the input and the discussion that we've had. Yeah, do you have any kind of like closing words from anyone here? Don't have time for UGC or anything like that, so if you want to maybe just like say your last words, and then we can wrap up and end the stream. And you can go first, Dino.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, never mind. SkillSpecs, stole your seat.
I just
No,
said,
that's good,
I
that's
was
good,
ready,
yeah.
man. Just boom, done, easy.
What SkillSpecs said? No, just thank you for having us on, really, and talking about
Kiss the
PvP,
cam,
really.
mate. Come on, Dino.
I'm not kissing the cam, mate.
I've had a little pot
Come
friend,
on,
man.
there's a little one.
This round is on. It was really productive. Really fun.
Good, I'm glad you thought so. Rock, Goblin,
thank
anything
you.
from yourselves?
Not really. I think Jay said it all.
Sorry, Rock.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly like shout out everyone who, even after all of this time, still engages with conversations around PvP, whether through the Discord, through the mentions, through my DMs, etc., on Reddit, like anywhere. Just you know, we are reading, we're trying. It's like slow going, but hopefully we'll get there. So thanks for bearing with us, and thanks for, you know, I think by and large being constructive for the most part. I think we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's a really,
Fingers
really,
crossed.
really good note, actually, Goblin. Thank you for that. I'm sure we will
Yeah,
eventually
right.
figure it out. I guess the last ones from me is like, just not to put things on like a negative, but just remember that like as a team, we are obviously human. We make mistakes. Sometimes we say dumb shit. Sometimes we get put on the spot in live streams ourselves as well, and we panic and say things that quite frankly could have been said better. That's just the reality of life and being a human. So try and be a little bit patient with us. As Goblin said, we are genuinely trying. We do want to look at improving PvP. So yeah, carry on working with us, and I just want to extend that thank you really for your patience, because we know that it's been a long time coming, and that there's problems that exist now that have existed for a long time as well. So we will eventually get around to it. So on that note, I'm going to go. I'm going to get in trouble for swearing on the live stream, but that's okay, because it was worth it.
You'll be alright.
Have a good rest of the week, everyone. Enjoy yourselves, and we'll be back on Thursday, by the way, for the normal Q&A that's going to be going ahead. So look forward to that. Make sure you tune in, and we'll let you know of the future of PvP streams and stuff like that. Hopefully, we'll do more of them. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. See ya.
Bye.